Hey, I'm James from Smoky Dad Barbecue, and today I'm sharing for how around 50 bucks I upgraded my cheap offset smoker to have some of the exclusive features you normally find on a premium backyard offset smoker. So the question that keeps me up at night and perhaps keeps some of you up at night is, do I really need to spend more to get the absolute best quality barbecue? And sometimes the only way to answer these things in life is to put them head to head, and that is exactly what I've done. Now, full disclosure, I've bought both of these offsets. This is my Smoke North Carlisle offset smoker that I bought about a year and a half ago, and this is my Oklahoma Joes Highland offset smoker. And the reason that I wanted to answer this question is there's a rumor of a second generation Smoke North Carlisle and Huron offset pit coming out, and every fabric of my body wants to upgrade. But before I do that, if I'm not sure if that's financially a good decision, I wanted to run this test and say, is there really a difference between an offset smoker and a premium offset smoker that costs several $1,000s more? And if there is a difference, are there things that we can do for a couple of bucks that help close that difference? And so today I'm going to walk you through what I've learned about an inexpensive offset smoker versus a premium offset smoker, the changes and the modifications that I've made, and more importantly, my verdict on whether or not they work, and if you can help close the gap between an inexpensive offset and a premium offset costing several times as much. Let me start by saying first, if you own an Oklahoma Joes Highland or any other cheap offset smoker, first let me commend you and validate something that you might be wondering. This is way more difficult to use than my premium backyard offset smoker. And I was just blown away at the extra steps that I had to take to get a clean burning fire. So normally I use sort of a full size, or for me, for a 60-gallon offset, this is about a full size split. It's about 12 inches in size and about the thickness of an average wrist, if not a little bit larger. The first thing I had to do is start cutting down these splits in half to make sure I could get clean burning combustion. But even going down to half wasn't enough. I had to get the axe out and split those again down into half to go with really, really small pieces. And by doing this, I was able to maintain a coal bed and get open flame the entire time. But this alone is a lot more work than what I become accustomed to on my premium backyard offset. The first couple experiments that I did leading into my rib cook, I put all these tips and tricks into practice in order to run a clean burning fire for the entire 5-hour rib cook. And when I was all said and done, the ribs were utterly disgusting. They were maybe the worst ribs, I'm embarrassed to say, I've made in recent memory. This isn't great. So what were a couple things that I was struggling with? Well, first, as the cook went on, there became a difference between the firebox and the smokestack of about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's because our fire's burning down low and it's being drawn up high versus having something like a collector here on my premium offset. We also started to have some trouble just keeping our wood to combust. If I let the temperatures get anywhere down near about 250 and added a split, the coal bed wasn't necessarily hot enough in order to have that combust. So I had to run my fire a little bit hotter than what I would like for that low and slow cooking, just to make sure that I got clean combustion. And the third issue that I think that I was dealing with is the airflow inside the grill in terms of either where we place the water pan or as well as how it vents out. And so maybe this is the lack of draw of the chimney, but we want smoke on our food, but we also want it to hang out and then leave. This is like a dinner party. You want your guests to come and eventually you want them to leave. And if they overstay their welcome, it becomes really unpleasant. And smoke stuck inside our smoke chamber, perhaps due to a lack of draw, can do the same thing. And when this was all said and done, my meter probes had a bit of creosote and ash soot sort of built up on them, and the ribs tasted pretty much like you were just licking those. It was absolutely disgusting. So let me share a couple of modifications that I've made to my Oklahoma Joes Highland offset smoker that I've achieved for about total of 50 bucks. And you can apply this either to an Oklahoma Joe or many other inexpensive offset smokers. That'll help close some of the performance and feature gap to something like this premium backyard offset. So there are 3 features often found on premium backyard offsets that often don't show up on the more inexpensive entry-level starting price points. And these 3 features, in no particular order that I wanted to try and address, are an insulated firebox, a smokestack collector that helps pull that air back down so we get nice, uniform, even cooking temperatures across our grid. And third is a larger chimney, both in either length as well as overall diameter, to help make sure that we have great airflow and give us the ability to control that so we can get the right amount of smoke lingering in our cook chamber before it's being pulled up and out the stack. So the first problem that I wanted to tackle was the semi-insulated firebox. Now, when you get to a backyard offset, you can have a whole bunch of choices from non-insulated to semi-insulated to all the way insulated. I have lots of fully insulated cookers around here, whether they're my Kamado Joes or my pizza oven. And so I've already got plenty of experience with a grill that can run. My Big Joe, I've ran it for 56 hours on one load of fuel, so it's barely smoldering along. And I have to throw everything, every trick that in the book that I can come up with in order to help get a nice, clean, hot burning fire in order to get barbecue results that taste more similar to my premium backyard offset. So for me, when I looked at the fully insulated firebox options, often that start to show up in and around the 250 gallon or larger space, this wasn't something that I wanted. On the same hand, you can go the other way where you have a completely non-insulated firebox like the one on my Oklahoma Joes Highland offset, and you could be struggling to maintain your fire bed. And this is where you see people starting to go from using wood as their heat and wood as their fuel to doing a combination often with charcoal for their heat and wood for their flavor. But I've done this many, many times in my Joes, and a charcoal fire with heat and a little bit of wood for flavor just never tastes the same as wood all the way through. And so from the get-go, I made that my design goal. Other than adding a little bit of charcoal when I first start the grill to accelerate the process of getting a coal bed, I don't want to add any more charcoal. I want wood for both heat as well as flavor. And so the way that I'm going to do this is by creating a semi-insulated firebox, just like the one that I have on my Smoke North offset. The way that you do this is either two ways, by putting some insulating material around the firebox and putting another layer, or like on my Smoke North Carlisle, you have a circle, which is your firebox, and then there's another circle around the outside that helps create a barrier to trap hot air and retain some of that energy. And so this is a bottom semicircle inside the Smoke North offset that gives me this insulated firebox. This insulation also gives me little shelves that I can drop my wood splits onto and help make sure that they preheat and they combust instantly as soon as I add them onto the fire. I'll show you a little bit later on here with a ThermoPro, just like I would measure my pizza oven. I can take an IR temperature of the stones and they help maintain our coal bed much, much longer. In fact, sometimes even hours after I'm done my cook on my offset, I can stoke those coals and still see hot glowing embers, which just makes it that much easier when you're trying to maintain your fire. So I'm not a welder, nor did I want to pay a bunch of money for maybe even like an aftermarket kit. There's something called Go Prometheus for about 250 US, which is just shy of about what this entire smoker cost me at clearance, that adds sort of this semi-insulated firebox. It's a metal box that you would screw into the bottom of your firebox. It also comes with what they call a 6-shooter, which is a little metal latch designed to help give you more air to open up your top of your dome. And I just find, we don't really need that, as well as an extended chimney stack. So these three things combined for about $250 are available in an aftermarket kit. But drawing inspiration from my pizza oven, where we have fire brick on the floor that eventually absorbs all that heat and energy from our fire, it's much, much easier to add wood splits in something like my pizza oven once it gets hot. So that's where I've gone for inspiration in terms of how I'm going to solve the semi-insulated firebox, given I don't want to weld it and I don't want to spend something like $250 for an aftermarket kit. So going to Lowe's for about $5 a piece Canadian, there were fire bricks. I picked up 5 of them, so 3 of them would fit just as I'll show you here inside the firebox, and the other 2 I cut in half. Now I could cut them so that they come all the way to the front of the draft door, but I didn't want this to potentially interfere with airflow. So I just cut them in half so there's still room for air to come up into our smoke chamber. The other benefit of these fire bricks in our smoke chamber is they give us these sort of quasi smoke shelves. And so instead of just sitting my wood up on top here, I'm able to get them even hotter by placing them on top of the ceramic tiles so that they get nice and heat. So when I want to add them, they combust instantly. The next issue that I wanted to solve for is the evenness or the lack of evenness across the cooking bread. One of the things I admire about my Smoke North Carlisle is there is a giant section in the middle that runs within about 1 degree of one another. So when I first did a couple experiments with probes all over the place, I had a hot spot coming out of the firebox as well as a hot spot over by the collector, and you could see sort of the flow of the smoke coming up and over. So 350 degrees, 350 degrees, and a nice even 300 degrees Fahrenheit all the way across on my Carlisle offset. When I did a similar experiment using the data here on my Oklahoma Joes, I was seeing about 100-degree Fahrenheit difference between the firebox and the chimney, as you'd expect, because the firebox is down here, the chimney is originally located up here, and that is just causing a diagonal line of the smoke to go right from the low pressure point to the high pressure point up top. And so the way that I solve this is picking up a 90-degree 3-inch elbow from Home Depot. Again, this is $3 or $4, I believe, US, about $5 Canadian. And this fit with no modification directly into our smokestack and moved our air intake from up at the top of the smoke chamber right down to the cooking level with where our food is. And showing you the meter app here, where I'm again doing the same experiment using an onion with 2 different probes and cooking another set, 2 sets of baby back ribs. I've been fluctuating within 1 to maximum 3 degrees difference between the front and the back. And so I'm going to call this already completely solving the uniform temperatures across our cooking grids. The third issue to solve for is our draw, and I'm breaking this into a part A and a part B. So part A is fixing smoke leaks, and so to help do that, I've installed some leftover felt gasket that I had, cut it in half, and put this all the way around my open door, and as you can see, we are not getting any smoke leaks. I was also getting some smoke leaks out of the chimney stack, so I again installed a little bit of extra gasket material here. And this is really important. It's maybe a bad analogy, but I'll try and do it because I think it will make some sense. If you're driving along, say at 70 miles an hour on the highway, and you're looking at your real-time miles per gallon, and then you see an opportunity to pull in behind a transport truck and you maintain speed, cruise control, 70 miles an hour, all of a sudden you see your fuel mileage improve. You're going the exact same 70 miles per hour, but the amount of wind that is hitting the front of your vehicle is greatly reduced as you're drafting in behind a transport truck. Smoke leaks work a little bit like this, where if we are losing a bunch of smoke along the bottom of our cook chamber, this is smoke coming into the cook chamber and sort of veering off to the left or the right and escaping out the chamber instead of coming up and over our vehicle. And unlike the hypermilers out there who want to tuck in behind transport trucks and not be exposed to any of that wind, we actually want our food that we are cooking inside our cook chamber to have exposure to the smoke. We want that smoke to hit it, move it, and then escape. So this is where part B comes in. So part A is all about making sure that we don't have smoke veering off to the left or the right and not hitting our food. And part B is that once it's hit our food, we want to get it up and out of there. And so using most custom offset pit builder calculations online, there's a whole bunch of calculators and resources below, so I won't go too much to detail in that. But the consensus in general is the smokestack on the Oklahoma Joes, as the example here that I've bought, is about 16 inches too short to be ideal. So I ordered off Amazon a 3-inch exhaust pipe, which comes with a tapered end that allow me to slide it directly on top of the OEM smokestack. Then got a metal band for my miter saw, so I was able to cut off about 3 inches and bring this back to the ideal height. I thought I could at first maybe solder a little bit of a screw in here. As you can tell, I don't know much about solder since it doesn't stick to aluminum. So instead I just went for high heat silicone in order to stick a screw so I could get control of my chimney top, so I could get my original chimney top installed back on there for some extra damper control if we need it. So, did our mods adding up to about $50 solve our problems? Well, for the most part, yes. So the couple things that we set out to achieve is 1, even grid temperatures. And as you see here in the meter chart, by installing that 90-degree elbow and bringing our draw down to grid level, we are now getting even temperatures front and back of the smoker. So we're going to call that a check. Our second goal was to look at insulating our firebox and make it a little bit easier to maintain fires. In fact, this was starting to work so well once everything got heat soaked. And I'll say that as a caveat, it took a little bit longer to get our fire bricks heat soaked as well as our chimney heat soaked. And that was, I didn't mention that earlier, one of the reasons I went for muffler pipe instead of dryer vent pipe is as the temperatures, for me at least, get cool, if that was too cool, we could start to get some negative pressure and that would encourage backdrafting. So I went for a thicker alloy pipe, which is a 3-inch exhaust pipe. And so what that advantage gives us is as it becomes heat soaked and hot, we don't have the risk of it giving us any sort of negative pressure. And so that gave us great draw the entire cook. The only part that didn't work is if I show you here a little clip of my high heat silicone way of attaching the top. I need to come up with a better solution. Maybe it wasn't fully cured, or it just got soft with that hot air moving. It's rated to 600 degrees Fahrenheit, but nonetheless, it's not holding up that well. But the insulated firebox absolutely did its trick. When I took an IR gun, as I showed earlier, from the metal to the fire bricks, there's about a 700 degree difference. And this was holding heat so well, I was able to go from these really small splits where these cut in half with the miter saw and then split in half with the axe, to actually just going with the half, and they would combust nice and quick. And the advantage here is I went from sort of that 10 to 15 minute range to about 20 to 24 minutes using these splits. So not only did they combust much better when I added them into the firebox, I was able to get more time. And on a cook like ribs or brisket or pulled pork or things like that, that means I'm interacting with my fire, half a dozen to, depending on the length of the cook, maybe a dozen less times, which really sort of helps make it feel a little bit less like you're a ball and chain tied to the side of your smoker. So I think the insulated firebox worked. I think the draw worked. And last but not least is the most important part, which is the taste test. So let me take you over to the counter and show you a minute ago what happened when I dove into these ribs. So moment of truth, smoke ring looks good, bark looks good. Let's find out. So not my best offset rib by any means, but this can break into the top 20 for sure. Nothing wrong with this rib. This is what something that you put 5 hours of work into should taste like. No problem serving this to friends and family. Let's go back for a recap. So on the all in all, I'm gonna give all of these mods 2 thumbs up. The felt to help make sure that we get our smoke passing over our meat and not taking any side exits and veering out of the chamber is 2 thumbs up. Going for our chimney extension and getting draw, not only I think that helped improve the cook time, but the flavor of the smoke as well by vacuuming out any of that stale smoke that was starting to create some of that bitter off-putting taste. And the insulated or semi-insulated firebox not only made it much easier to maintain fires, we were able to get away with adding slightly larger wood splits, which just reduces the amount of babysitting or the hand-holding that we have to do in order to get nice clean combustion. So if you have an Oklahoma Joes or any other inexpensive offset smoker, I would 100% do these things. I don't think, for the money, again, I haven't bought one, but the $250 Prometheus kit for 5 times the price to do the same thing, you can never really answer these questions until you test them. But for me, I'm not racing out to spend 5 times more, and then you have to deal with the color of everything being red. And this is coming from a guy who clearly has no problem with everything being red. Now, how does it compare, or where is it starting to inform my decision in terms of upgrading, my Smoke North offset? One of the reasons that I got an offset is for capacity and having friends over. And one of the things I might even be thinking about is, do I even go, for a larger size? And so after doing a couple cooks, and even though this went much better, so yeah, if you have this, by 100%, do these mods. They will make a world of difference for the experience as well as the quality of the food that you're able to turn out. But is this going to change my mind in terms of not stepping up to more capacity? I don't think so. One of the reasons I wanted an offset is, again, for those large capacity cooks. And here we're limited, and if I took out the probes, to about 3 racks of ribs is what I could fit in the sweet spot of our temperature range. Maybe 1 brisket. I can fit 6 racks of ribs on my large Kamado Joe, and I could fit 5 or 6 on my Carlisle offset. If anything, I want sometimes to be able to fit even more. And so I think if you're going to go for an offset, it makes sense to go for a larger size than look at something like a 20 to 30 gallon offset smoker like the Oklahoma Highland. And even for me, at the 60 gallon of the Carlisle, I think a little bit more space, if you're going to go through the work of adding splits, maintaining your fire, especially if you need to go through the added work of breaking them down even further, it just makes so much more sense, and it's easier to run a fire with a larger backyard offset. I've got a couple more tests in store. Let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments down below. But that's it for today. I'm James from Smoking Head Barbecue signing off. And remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.